Chapter 1. Esther's Story in a Nutshell. Who knows if perhaps you were made queen for such a time as this? Esther, chapter 4, verse 14. The inspiration for the Esther Project is a young Jewish woman named Esther, originally known as Hadassah, who became the queen of Persia. Esther remains a modern day role model, inspiring contemporary women seeking to move forward toward their own empowerment. Her story inspires women on their perpetual journey of womanhood. Esther's journey is memorialized in the biblical book of Esther and is often noted in historical, biblical, and Judaic based writings. Esther is also the central figure in the Jewish celebration of Purim, a day that commemorates the deliverance of the Jewish inhabitants of ancient Persia from annihilation. Esther resided in the province of Susa with her cousin Mordecai, who had adopted her after her parents died. She was married to Xerxes, king of the mighty empire of Persia. During Xerxes' reign, Persia grew to be a dominant superpower. Xerxes was known as an ambitious warrior king who was anxious to spread his kingdom. Prior to Esther's reign, Xerxes was wedded to a different queen, Vashti, who fell out of favor with the king when she refused a summons during a celebratory feast. Xerxes was angered at her public insolence and embarrassed at the precedent that her refusal set for other women in the kingdom. Vashti was dismissed and a search for a new queen began. The stage is set. Enter Esther. After the king decreed the search for a new queen, Esther was taken into the king's palace with other women to prepare for the competitive royal selection process. First, Esther entered into an intensive preparation process where she learned etiquette, grooming, self-care, fashion, and wardrobe, the art of conversation, and everything necessary to demonstrate to the king that she would seamlessly acquire the role as queen if selected. During her preparation, Esther was moved to the best place in the harem, given handmaidens and her choice of clothing and jewelry. Through her mastery of preparation, Esther found favor in the king's eyes and was selected as queen. During Esther's reign as queen, she hid her Jewish identity because of the status of Jews in the kingdom. Jewish inhabitants were allowed to reside in the kingdom after they'd been previously exiled from Jerusalem. However, they did not possess full rights, privileges, and protections of other citizens. Hence, Mordecai advised her to change her Jewish name, Hadassah, to a Babylonian name, Esther. One of the king's chief advisors, Haman, became jealous of Mordecai and hateful of the Jewish inhabitants because of his prejudice that had been passed down generationally from his Agagite descendants. Haman abused his royal power by devising a plan to mislead Xerxes into signing an ordinance to kill every Jewish inhabitant. Mordecai challenged Esther to intercede on behalf of her countrymen, despite the fact that protocol prevented her from approaching the king on any matter uninvited without the risk of death. Ultimately, he challenged Esther to consider whether God had ordained that she had been selected as queen so that she could be in a position to intervene under these circumstances. In other words, Mordecai challenged Esther to consider whether she had been purposed to be queen for such a time as this. Esther 4:14. Esther's response was to fast and pray for guidance in her decision, and to entreat her handmaidens and all of the Jews in the kingdom to do the same. She decided to risk her life and approach the king to plead for the lives of her people. Esther was successful by using her grace and hospitality, preparing a feast for the king, in whose eyes she continued to receive favor. He was so pleased with her that he asked for her request to be made known and offered her up to half of his kingdom. While the king's edict could not be rescinded once it was issued, Esther was able to convince the king to issue an edict that would enable the Jewish inhabitants to use arms to defend themselves if anyone tried to kill them. Esther was also able to expose Haman's racial bias, which resulted in his execution as well as the public execution of his 10 sons. In Esther's courageous stand, the lives of countless men, women, and children were saved. Lessons from Esther's journey. Esther had to figure out who she was, either a queen enjoying the comforts of a carefree existence, or a woman determined to do God's will at all cost. Mordecai had challenged her to be relevant to the needs of the time. Esther's story illustrates that we cannot neglect the responsibility of positions of power that God sets us in. We are called to use our power at just the right time for the right reason. We have the potential and authority to impact the quality of life of others, which are both a responsibility and a challenge. Did you ever consider that perhaps you are in the circumstances that you are in for such a time as this? Esther's story compels the conclusion that she was preordained to be queen during this time so that she could intervene at just the right time. God loved his people so much that he orchestrated the plan that one Jewish young woman would be the highest ranking female leader in the palace through her grace and humility. Here's some inspiration from Esther's journey. Get in the game. Esther got in the game. Achieving your purpose requires knowing the rules of the game. God will orchestrate and order everything so that we can step into our roles. He will give you insight in order to have the godly confidence, determination, and focus demonstrated by Esther. She pushed past those challenges and still got in the game. Say goodnight to your past. Esther did not allow her past to hold her back, nor did she wear her experiences on her sleeve. There were simply no excuses. We are neither defined nor limited by the circumstances that we find ourselves in. As an orphan, God did not intend to break her or limit her ability to have a successful relationship. It was intended to bring out the gifts inside of her. Purpose requires preparation. Esther prepared herself. Preparation can be painful because we are getting out of our comfort zone, allowing us to overcome lameness, sameness, and tameness. We define ourselves by our past sometimes, material possessions, family background, socioeconomic status. But these are worldly attributes that society assigns. God already knows who you are and wants you to know who you are. He gives us signs that we are royalty and victorious. Keep it positive. Esther had a positive attitude and submitted to the process. She exhibited openness to being transformed. Her attitude was one of mastering her craft of personal presentation. Her mind allowed her to see herself as queen, and as a result, Esther excelled in the process and received favor. Esther won the prize gracefully. Accept the next challenge. Faith allows us to be confident in knowing that He has orchestrated everything with our success in mind. We are often ripped away from what is comfortable during preparation, but it's necessary for our next level. When Esther was in the palace, she could only depend on God to prepare her for the position, which allowed her to be ready to fulfill her purpose. As a result, she prevented genocide of her day. God is preparing you for His own purposes, and He has you in a place where you can only rely on Him. Esther's characteristics: humility, grace, confidence, determination, focus, beauty, strength, boldness, obedience, femininity, kindness, leadership. Reveal your inner Esther. There is an essence of Esther inside of each of us that makes us capable of similarly fulfilling our purpose. Esther sought God first because she recognized that the challenge that she faced was one of spiritual proportions. She recognized that her other gifts were ineffective, if not empowered by God's anointing. Similarly, our purpose is found at the intersection of our identity and our position. We find this place through self-discovery and God's revelation. As God's children, we are called to go beyond the four walls of the church to impact society from a place of leadership. Is this a season of leadership development for you? Was this season and time uniquely penned for your existence? What is the time and season in your life? Focus outwardly with a critical eye in order to discover how your present relationships, finances, and status in your community are relevant to the world. Esther did not use manipulation, but she used her own gifts, which she had prepared and sharpened to increase the quality of life of other human beings. God is calling you to do the same, to reveal the Esther in you. You are so important that you can uniquely impact the world. Do you believe that you were ordained to change the course of human history? Will you step up to the challenge? You were created for such a time as this. Affirmation: I am strong and beautiful. I am Esther. Wisdom challenge: read the biblical book of Esther. Reflection questions: what inspires you about Esther's story? Which of Esther's qualities do you possess? Which of Esther's qualities do you desire?